Amazon Prime's Reacher is a great show. It has really cool characters, great action sequences, and a very intriguing plot. It's also very cliche, and I mean that as a good thing. Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mason Brown. I'm the guy who sits in this chair and says things, and I'm happy to have you back. Now, cliches have become something of a buzzword within the storytelling community. Most of the time when we're talking about cliches, we use that as a bad term to say, oh, the story is predictable, or it's too comfortable, it's too familiar, we've all seen it before. And I think there's something to be said for trying to write outside of a cliche, or to take a cliche in a new direction and try to subvert expectations and really kind of challenge yourself and challenge a reader as far as what their expectations are with regards to cliches. But I think that overlooks a key aspect of the term cliche, is that a cliche is something that we are already familiar with. It's something that we already have some sort of a connection to, some sort of understanding of. And even just with a few simple words, a storyteller can convey something to an audience member that would take much longer without. For example, if I were to tell you that I regularly run Dungeons & Dragons games that are typically set in a fantasy setting, you would already know what I'm talking about. Even if you don't know the game, even if you don't know the rules, you would already understand that there's probably some kind of, swords and sorcery, knights in armor, dragons, there's magic items, there's monsters to be fought and adventures to be had. There's some things that are kind of written into the fantasy genre that we naturally understand. But in many ways, that's why we play Dungeons and Dragons. That's why we enjoy fantasy stories. That's why we enjoy stories that are built on cliches, because they are familiar, because there is something there that we can immediately latch onto, immediately understand about certain characters, certain character types, certain settings, certain genres, certain plot points, things that we naturally expect within certain stories, within certain movies, that make it easier for us to consume. They make them much more digestible, much more understandable and relatable within their own sense. And that's really what I mean here when I say that Reacher is a very cliche show. There's a lot of elements that you probably expect just from looking at pictures or looking at a trailer that are accurate to what the show presents, as far as its characters, as far as its plot, as far as the genre and the action that is kind of set up within the show. You go in with these expectations that you as an audience member hold, that you expect the screenwriters to share with you. And even as far as your expectations for the character of Reacher himself, I mean, look at him in this picture here. He's cut up, so clearly he's been in some sort of a violent encounter. He's got that ruggedly handsome look to him, so clearly he must be some sort of a good character within this series. He's got a look of determination in his eyes, like he's out for vengeance or out for justice. You can tell there's sort of a sympathy within his eyes, but there's also a determination and kind of a sense of justice there. He's clearly jacked, which means that he is a very intimidating and very proficient fighter. He's a strong, silent type who rolls into town and clears out the muck and the corruption sort of within this town. Just even looking at this picture, you can see sort of a dark background, but he's very well lit. So you can see that he sort of stands against the darker forces or the more violent elements within these stories. And these are character traits that we're very familiar with. There's many other characters within the medium of film and television and novels that we would relate to the character of Reacher. For example, a lot of westerns have the same sort of a character archetype as this new sort of silent stranger moves into town. Things start to happen, things start to unfold, and we see elements within this small town that may not be as clean or as good as they originally looked. And it is up to our sole silent stranger to root out the darkness and cleanse the town, as it were. We've even seen this in more modern examples with video games and stories and TV shows like The Witcher, Geralt of Rivia. This very stoic, very silent, very strong stranger, this outcast who walks through a town, takes on jobs, and kind of cleans up the town in some way, often in a reluctant way. But this sort of character archetype is something that we've seen before. We're very familiar with, but it's also comfortable. It's something that we can easily understand, easily convey through really a series of shots, a series of elements or a couple of lines of dialogue, and you're already on board with who this character is and what they stand for. And even the setting of the show is very cliche. You have your typical small town in America. This one is set in Margrave in Georgia. It looks to be kind of your average run-of-the-mill American small town with peach pie and a diner. Small barbershop, there's small parks, there's a local mayor. You know, and you think back to how many times you've seen these stories that are set in, you know, small towns across the U.S. and kind of the local politics and secrets that come up. There's always some sort of a criminal element. There's some kind of a mystery or a secret that the smiling faces that you first see are masks hiding much darker revelations later on in the show. That's very much the case with Reacher. And even with my limited understanding of the book series by Lee Child, Reacher goes to a new town within every book. And you know, goes through the same sort of a formula where he goes in, strange things start to happen, new secrets begin to surface, there's a criminal element or some kind of a bad influence in the town that Reacher has to discover and root out as the mystery begins to unfurl, and then he cleans up the town before moving on to the next. Even the other characters in the show serve their own cliche archetype. You have Detective Finley, who's a very straight-laced, very by-the-books, tweed suit wearing detective who is working to unearth some of the mysteries and the secrets within Margrave. He has his own secrets, as everybody in the show does, but he's at odds with Reacher for much of the show as far as Reacher's approach to unearthing these secrets is very unorthodox. Reacher is able and willing to do things that are beyond what a detective would do. You also have a police officer Roscoe as a love interest as well as another protagonist ally. These are the three characters that you feel like you can really trust within the show, and their own stories and their own story arcs as they kind of conflict with one another and then eventually form an alliance and take on the criminal element within Margrave. It's very cathartic, it's very fun to watch, it's predictable, but there's something comforting in that predictability. And that's really my main takeaway here, is how comfortable and predictable a show like this can be, but still so much fun to watch. Because you know generally what's going to happen, you know generally the plot archetypes, you know the characters that you're going to meet, you know the setting, you know generally what's going to happen throughout the show. It's really no major surprise the way that everything unfolds. But it's the journey and the anticipation of getting there that is most of the fun for this. You know there's going to be great action set pieces. You know there's going to be a lot of violence, a lot of gore within this show. You know there's going to be a lot of conflict and a lot of investigation. There's going to be a lot of twists and turns along the way. But that's all part of the fun. There's something to be said for watching something that you already know the outcome of, isn't there? I mean, look at the popularity of Hallmark movies. We all joke about how cliche and formulaic they are, but they're actually really fun to watch because there's no stress of what the outcome will be. You already know that it's going to be, it's going to end well. There'll be some comedy, there'll be some conflict along the way, but you know that the outcome is going to be something that's fun and enjoyable and engaging. Much the same way with shows like Reacher. It's almost like a formulaic cop show in that you know that by the end of the episode, they're going to find the murderer, they're going to solve the case, they're going to move on to the next, and there is a comfort in that, in the predictability. So to all my writers out there, don't be afraid to use cliches. Cliches are a great foundation for these stories because they give us, as an audience, something to immediately latch onto, something that we understand innately within the genre, within the character archetypes, within the plot, whatever it might be. It's also a great way later on to subvert or kind of change those expectations, but I don't think there's anything wrong with sticking to a cliche. I think it makes for a fun and enjoyable story. At the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with a story like this. But these are my thoughts on the Amazon Prime show Reacher and the power of cliche. Do you have any cliches that you enjoy watching or that you're sick and tired of seeing? What are some creative ways of subverting expectations, of subverting those cliches or building on them in a way that creates a consumable, likable, enjoyable story? If there are, let me know in the comments down below, or make your own video talking about cliches or talking about Reacher or really any other thing, and leave it down in the comments. Leave a link. I would love to check it out. But that's it for me today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Sorry it's been so long since I posted again. I do have plans for another video later on this week on why stories matter and how every story you've ever heard is absolutely real. So check that out later on this week. But that's it for me today. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time right here.